Let's do something slightly different this week. I got this inspiration somewhere along the way recently to look at a chart for the week. And it's not like I'm going to choose somebody that happens to be born in early Sagittarius to look at their chart. More along the lines of doing a chart that is for 1 minute after midnight on the 24th, which is Monday, the beginning of the week. And like any chart that you do, something is being birthed. That is what an astrological chart is about. And so I don't have the green screen set up completely behind me because I needed to use the table for setting up some of the aspects of what do I look at when I look at a chart. Let's pull up a chart. Okay, this is a chart for 12:01 a.m. Monday morning. First things I look at a chart when are what are the sun, moon, and ascendant doing? The moon I look at as the soul. There's a there's a very dynamic connection to that kind of energy. And so the moon, as you can see, is down here in Capricorn and the fifth house. Uh, and I will frame it as this initiation point, this birth new point is the soul, has the soul of a Capricorn or the wise elder, the executive, the advisor. These are Capricorn flavors, and it's in the fifth house. Fifth house is a house of creativity, generally a Leo house, and so this soul that comes into this birth moment to begin this week has this, you know, I want to take a chance. That's a fifth house thing. There's also a connection to children. That is a fifth house thing. But it's definitely the Capricorn, that wise elder energy is you can almost picture the children gathering around a storyteller, the wise elder, to hear what is it that this old codger and fart is going to, put before us for consideration that we might learn something from. Anyway, that's the moon, the soul of what is being born at the beginning of this week. And then we come to the sun. The sun is the path that we're walking on. And right here, the sun has just recently, 2 days ago, went into Sagittarius. Actually, it was one day ago from today, which is Sunday. Sagittarius, who is Sagittarius? Sagittarius is the philosopher, the teacher, and the gypsy. This is in the third house, but less than a degree away from the IC, Imum Coli, down here at the bottom of the chart. So it has some of the flavor of both the third and the fourth houses. But it is Sagittarius. Sagittarius is about, you know, what is the largest possible picture that I can come up with in this moment and still sense that there's something more that I need to look at. Third house. From a third house perspective, what is it that I want to learn? And that does take into consideration that Sagittarian dance, you know, this this process of, being able to tune into as effectively as possible into the larger picture of religion, philosophy, the uh, the cultural differences that exist on the planet. These are all in that Sagittarius archetype. And being in the third house, I want to learn something more about it. So the path that the sun is taking here as we begin this week is, you know, curiosity. There's another third house term that works really well. And last, but definitely not least, is the ascendant. The ascendant is kind of like a it's a screen, if you will, that we put up in front of ourselves to uh, basically interact or filter what the exchange is going to transpire as we engage with the world. Or a mask, you could call it. Virgo. Who is Virgo? That sets up this pattern of, you know, the mentor, the sacred servant, or the craftsman. These are all Virgoan flavors. And so it's a first house kind of consideration. So the general energy that is being put forth right there at the beginning of the work week as a path to follow is that Virgoan quality, the kind of the energy of finding an effective way to make things work. That's all about the Virgo. Next thing we want to look at are the nodes of the moon, south and north. Here we have south node, we look at first. It's in Virgo. It's conjunct the ascendant, so therefore, well, what are these two nodes anyway? South node has a connection to a certain level of signature that your soul, when it incarnated this time around, has decided to work on related to other versions of incarnation previously that you have been through that mm, may not have worked out as well as you had hoped. What the South Node represents then is the um, the initiation of a process where, you know, tuning into what kind of essence did your soul come out of these previous incarnations that likely were not the most comfortable in the world because of particular challenges that you maybe didn't handle as well as you had hoped to handle and left some damage in your soul heart space that in the current incarnation you came to work on. And so here we have it on the ascendant in the first house. There's a flavor of, kind of initiation. That is a good first house term. And it is of the nature that you could say, a good way to describe it is like, I don't really know. That's a good way to approach a first house things because it's like freshly arriving, being born anew. There's a new thing that, there's a lot of potential out in front of you. Choosing a direction to go in, that's part of the process of the whole chart. First house is kind of like the adventure of life has just ticked on, and I don't really know what I want to do, but I can feel the energy. You can kind of feel that first house, the impulse, the drive to do something. Not necessarily knowing what it is, but it's there. There's, something quite dynamic in it. And looking at that, we say, well, who's the ruler of this Virgo South Node? Well, the ruler is Mercury down here in Scorpio in the third house, retrograde, and in conjunction with Venus. So, what the ruling planet of that South Node represents, and I have some flashcards set up here in the background for this particular dance, says this could be a representation of a person characterized by quickness. That's That's basically a mercurial nature, intelligence, the role of the student or teacher. Now, doesn't that all ring quite uniquely with that Mercury sitting there in the third house? Oh, yeah. How about the silver tone, the role of a writer, a journalist, messenger, using language skills dishonestly, because we're talking here about the South Node that, you might say you could see that that could lead one into avenues that didn't play out as well as you may have hoped. Amorality, trickery, and cunning. It's in Scorpio. This could be an indication of bitterness, despair, unresolved psychological issues, madness, moodiness, bloody mindedness, suspicion, fascination with the dark side of life, woundedness, and vengeance. Now, back to our South Node again, because what we're doing is we're putting together, you know, little snippets of consideration that, you know, each one of them is can be and is in the process of looking at this nodal story, a an alignment of a developing storyline. So here, back to our Virgo North Node, South Node, a sense of personal inadequacy, guilt, shame, self-doubt, endless preparation. Can you feel the Virgo in that? An inflated sense of one's duties and responsibilities. You can really sense the that that Virgoan desire to make sure that they're doing it right. Slavish mentality, picky criticism, the urge to put others down. Now, what, pray tell, do you think could have been the results of that particular incarnation that we're being birthed into for this week might be in play on the negative side? It's in the first house. So here we have a concept of leadership and decision making and control, pressure to decide. And it's kind of like, yeah, there is a pressure when you get to that first house to decide on a direction, but take your time. It's taking a stand, make a stand. There's high stakes and insufficient information. Can you picture in that something new is developing? I don't know what it is. So that's if you put all that together, considering it just from the South Node perspective, you could kind of see that the initiation point of this particular week that we're going into has this hello world, I am new. I don't exactly know what it is that is the most appropriate steps I should take going forward. I know I need to take them though. And, you know, at the same time, since this is the South Node we're looking at, what carryover from yesterday, last week, last month, last year, last lifetime am I arriving with as I set out on my trajectory for this week? That, you know, I may not be overtly comfortable with because, you know, A, it didn't really work out so well the last time. But I really want to, focus in and do something creative with it this time. This conjunction of Venus down here to the ruler of that north node says that it's highly likely, Venus in Scorpio, just, less than 2 degrees away, might there have been some level of partnership in the consideration that, you know, could have been challenging. Well, Venus in Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio, it's in its detriment, not in its strongest position to be in. And from the scorpionic perspective, you might say, could, might it have been a signature of the particular energy that we're considering here to, what, lean to the dark side of what Venus, that process of being in love from a scorpionic perspective, you know, intense level of intermingling one's energy with another at not necessarily the most appropriate level for what society says you should do. An attraction to gigolos, prostitutes, people who, thieves, people who are, skirting on the periphery of the accepted norms of what life is supposed to be about. Anyway, that's kind of part of the energy of this South Node that we come to deal with as we impulse into this next week. And one should always make sure that we check the other end of this destiny line, which is what the node line is. And that is over here in Pisces, in the seventh house. But from the seventh house perspective, partnership. First house is self, seventh house is partners. So the partnership part of the equation actually can provide an appropriate path forward to deal with those south node energies that, you know, arrived from yesterday. Well, the ruler of this north node in Pisces in the seventh house is Jupiter in Cancer up here in the seventh house and retrograde. Now, Zeus, another name for Jupiter, king of the gods, you know, here was a person, a personage. Here was a being that, had literally the control of everything. And it's in Cancer, the process of being in tune with the family and home in the 11th house, which is the arena of group energy, your cosmic tribe, so to speak. So partnering in a Piscean way, which is to not necessarily get too hung up on what it is that people say is the most appropriate way to, do this life dance in order to be comfortable with everybody else. I don't know that Pisces could lean into that in an effective enough way that it could be comfortable. Because Pisces is the deepest sign of the zodiac. There's a profound level of energy awareness that is leaning far more toward the spiritual side than the material side, usually. So, our Jupiter, ruler of this North Node, up here in the realm of, you know, groups. What types of groups might be most effective as we go into this week for us to be able to glean a more appropriate version of what our spiritual partnerships could and should be. Now, bringing in this Jupiter into the equation, we'll look at Jupiter at 24 degrees Cancer, water. Mercury, ruler of our ascendant and our south node, is at 23 degrees Scorpio, another water sign. And Kronos or Saturn, structure and form, up there in Pisces, 25 degrees Pisces, a water sign. This is our grand water trine that, you know, we're getting to experience. We've been experiencing on and off for quite a while now. The, this water element, which is all about making connections. That's what water is all about. And we have it in our group thing, how we want to learn and educate ourselves, and what is the overt potential of our interaction with others in a partnership fashion as we engage with the other to from the nodal axis, our destiny line. Are we tuned in with the appropriate people that will enhance the experience of what partnership can lead toward from a Piscean perspective to tune us more specifically into the spirit of life experience? Anyway, that was a look, just a quick, brief look into, glancing at an astrological chart for this week. Now, there's more, of course, going on to this week, and the reason I don't have the green screen up behind me is because I wanted to set up my flashcards for being able to do the nodal story dance for you with that particular chart. But here we are. Let's go into this week, 24th. So this week is brought to you by Mercury, Venus, mostly Mercury, Venus, but also Saturn, because Saturn's going to station direct a little later on this week. But Mercury and Venus are two of the main players for this week. So let's look at it. Or Venus, well, we talked a little bit about that. It's in Scorpio. So the potential for intimate connection with others is something that's on the table. Mercury is going to connect up with it right as the week begins. Mercury going backwards, Venus going forward, they're going to shift positions as they cross paths. And so you take that mercurial curiosity nature in the sign of Scorpio says, I want to know more about the secret meaning of the mysteries of life. This is Scorpio after all. Tapping in with who, Venus, might be others that cross our path that might carry the potential for insight into that particular type of query. As we begin the week, that's part of that energy that's you know kicking it up. We go ahead a couple more days, you can kind of see that and Mercury have shifted places. Uh, Venus is right now in that water trine that we were talking about with our 24 degrees of Venus, 24 degrees of Jupiter, and 25 degrees of Saturn. Kronos and Zeus and Venus, Aphrodite, has just danced into that, experience of what's going to take place that's going to be able to, allow for a fusion of energy to take place. And that's on Wednesday, which is, by the way, a mercurial day. Uh, if we go ahead one more day, uh, we have the first quarter moon. Doesn't look right, does it? Oh, it doesn't look right because the moon moves so friggin' fast. it actually goes all the way till the 5 degrees of Pisces, which is the first quarter moon. Crisis in action, you know, that is inviting us to, from our, yes, our high Sagittarian perch. Sagittarius would want nothing less. Look, it's right near the top of the chart. It's got Mars in the sign of Sagittarius, right? Saying, go for it. There's a driven kind of energy there that wants to. And if you notice, there's this dance going on between the Sun and Mars and Venus. Sun is traveling right now. They're all traveling at a real similar speed. Let's take a look here and see what speeds they're traveling. Let's see. The Sun is traveling a degree a day. Venus is traveling a little over a degree a day, and Mars is traveling a little under a degree a day, which means that they're going to maintain that, you know, traveling configuration for a while, with the moon right there in the midpoint between this Venus and so we have the that receptive feminine energy, you know, the Venus. And then we have that masculine driven energy of Mars sandwiching the Sun in Sagittarius. And by the time we get to the end of this week, Venus is going to move into Sagittarius as well, still maintaining that Sun at the center of this dance between our masculine and feminine energies. On this 27th day, Saturn, by the end of the day, is going to turn direct as well. Chronos, the 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 curator of form and structure, limitations, the the God that says, I want things to happen and I want them to happen in my way, and if you don't let them happen in my way, then I will bring down the pressure of the structure upon you, and you will have to carry the weight of that in whatever it is that you think you're trying to do. Can you feel that Chronos energy right there? In Pisces, however, so, you know, there's a hint, maybe a little more than a hint that there's an energetic spiritual quotient that's a part of the pressure pattern that Saturn is bringing that perhaps, maybe if we're not as tuned into what it means to be a spiritual being and we're hung up on the material dance of life that is so distracting, it's all around us all the time, that we're not really recognizing what it is that as soul beings we came to infuse our life force into and grow with that rather than the distractions of this material thing or that material thing that are, you know, not allowing for our spiritual attunement to this process of being alive. And we get to you can kind of see Mercury, I mean, Venus is moving along. Oh, let's see. Yeah, keep your eye on that Venus. We get to the 30th, 29 degrees, 46 minutes of Scorpio. On this very day, which is Sunday, the very last day of the week, Venus is going to shift across this line from Scorpio into Sagittarius. In a way, that particular transition, on the same day, we go back one day, kind of see Mercury still retrograde. On this very same day, Mercury has shifted into direct motion as well. So it'll be chasing after this Venus shifting into Sagittarius. We end the week with these three planets in Sagittarius. What in the um, collective signature of Sagittarius might demand our attention. Sagittarius is about the journey that we are on. And some folks have this inclination to pick an option, you know, as a goal, if you were. Says, I need to attain this particular goal. Now, once that goal is attained, that's not the end of the experience because life is a journey. You go from one point to the next point to the next. There is always more, and that is the essence of Sagittarius. Don't think that because you've reached some sort of goal along the way that you have, there's nothing left to do. And so the sun, that vitality of life as it's going through Sagittarius, is inviting us into a potential tailwind that is pushing us forward, saying, there's more. Don't get complacent with what it is that you've accomplished to this point because you need to stay awake. Pay attention to the potential interaction, intercultural interaction that is a requirement of being alive on the planet these days. Those different versions from the different cultures that we have the option to intermingle with. There are good reasons for that, to compare and share notes with one another so that each of us can be invited into a larger perspective of what it is that of who we are and what we came to do together. That is spirit at work. Anyway, you can kind of see my art studio that I have behind me, a couple pieces of art floating around. That's all I got for this week. And for that adventure, and it is an adventure, the quest of life. Sagittarius, make it an adventure. Don't try and, hold yourself back and be too small right now. We're being invited into an experience that uh, has things around the next corner that could be unexpectedly waiting for you to wake up to a part of yourself that you didn't know existed before now. I'm going to leave you with that. See you next week.